look, the agencies can move as fast as possible, and pharma companies can move drugs out as quickly as possible, and in some cases skip primate trials. So that is sometimes a concern, but ultimately the safety studies are all going to be done in similar ways. They're going to be measured for the amount of time and follow-up and clinical trial time. So as much as we want to be quick, clinical trials just take time. It takes time to deliver the dose, to identify the patients, deliver the dose, and then have the appropriate follow-up period in order to determine safety and efficacy. So will there be a shortcut that misses data? I think that should be, we hope there won't be a misstep because people are moving so quickly. I think that's really where the regulatory agencies are going to, if there is data that is not reported properly, I think they'll be able to catch that sort of a thing. Put fraud aside for a second, but I think usually with EMRs and the way, electronic medical records and the way you can capture data quickly, I don't expect there to be too much of a concern on safety. I think the big concern would be, in my mind, is if there are drugs that are starting to be used by the general public without good data.
Or if the trials are not designed well. For instance, the whole HCQ debacle started with researchers in France who did not have a randomized study that was reported and talked about the efficacy of an anti-malarial drug, which in China published yesterday in an open label control randomized trial where HCQ failed in the 28-day period they were looking for. So just so everyone's clear, trial design matters. And maybe you can comment on that. And also, what are adaptive trials? Talk a little bit about what you've been seeing. And your take on why trial design, because, and again, for people who are not familiar with healthcare at large, there is this common thing, especially living in San Francisco, where we see influential people with the check mark on their Twitter going out and saying, oh no, let's just test all these drugs on patients and we'll see what happens. The pandemic, we'll use like machine learning models in the real world and figure out what drug works. And unfortunately, we're dealing with human lives. And I don't know how else to say it. We're dealing with human lives. I'll just say it again for effect. We're dealing with human lives. We can't do that. And so, but Dan, maybe you can speak to a little bit on trial design and adaptive trials.
And no drug is without side effects. They all have issues. And the question is always, in fact, with every approval, is always a cost-benefit analysis of how much benefit are you giving and how much danger are you causing. And that's always the basis for approval. So I think that's not going to change in COVID. I laugh when you say adaptive trials. Vas knows that we've talked about this quite a bit, is that sort of the antiquated model going back 100 years, the usual way to do pharmaceutical clinical trials is essentially in series. You do one trial, you take a look, you do a second trial, you take a look, and you do one drug at a time. And in the last 5 years, people, with better statistics, with better analytics, and maybe a little bit more courage, whatever it took, a little chutzpah, we actually put trials in a much better position, meaning adaptive trials, platform trials. These are trials that can actually run multiple drugs at the same time against each other. Oncology has been doing this does this quite well. And now there's a great study out of Australia, New Zealand that's now going international. Europe picked it up. Middle East has picked it up to look at over 10 different potential COVID therapeutics and run them in parallel. This is a fantastic, and then one of the things that we, of course, look at Excision is adaptive trials. Can you actually adapt within the trial to make it faster, really faster, better, cheaper? We've seen some also examples in oncology where companies can get approved for the phase 1 trial. If you do the trial right and actually engineer it to show safety and efficacy with enough patients, there's no reason why you can't just keep expanding and showing efficacy. For example, if you've got a drug that you put into a trial for COVID, it shows that it's safe, and you start seeing efficacy, why not just expand it? Now you need a certain number statistically to show that and have confidence that when you go out to the general population of the globe, that you're going to be safe and effective. There is a number that statisticians can give you, and that's where it gets a little wonkish, where what is the right design of the clinical trial and how many patients, and then they're going to ask you questions. Well, how much is the difference? How many lives are you saving versus how many patients have died on your therapy based on whatever the side effect happens to be, which brings us right back to the cost benefit analysis and how you can actually have better trials that are faster, better, cheaper.